I got this online after a friend of mine sent me a listing for it, and once again the irony buy came into play. This was either going to be competent or at the very least something dumb to laugh at, and what I got was closer to the latter. Wangan Dead Heat is a racing game for the Saturn developed by Genki and published by Pack-In Video and JVC. It did get localized as Highway 2000, but since not Japanese Saturn games are pretty expensive, your best bet for a physical copy is going with the original release. And I wouldn't spend much more than the $10 I did on this one. I originally had this pinned as a bad game, but it kind of isn't. I mean, sure, if you're expecting substantially more depth than Cruisin' USA, you're going to be disappointed. But this is kind of designed along those lines of a basic racing game, and in that manner, it succeeds. You don't feel any sort of real accomplishment upon winning because it's pretty easy once you figured out its rules, but it's not bad because of that. To start out, you get an FMV prominently featuring a Mark IV Supra, complete with visible badges and markings. They had to make the most of having this car as it's visible in all of the FMV sequences and is the loading screen background. However, once you get to the car selection, you'll find that none of the branding is on any of the 3 available cars. I guess either licensing fell through or they just didn't want to do it, though it is pretty easy to tell what they actually are. I've been told you can unlock some bonus cars if you place first in all of the tournament races on hard, and there definitely is at least another model if one of the opponents is a basis to go by, but your effort is better placed elsewhere. There are 3 different modes: Scenario, Time Trial, and Battle. Battle is your split-screen 2-player versus mode, and while I didn't play any of that, I'm sure it's fine in relation to the rest of the game. Time Trial is almost a prerequisite for the main scenario mode because this will be the only opportunity for you to practice 4 of the 5 courses. Use this mode to familiarize yourself with which corners require drifts and which corners can be taken using grip techniques. Unfortunately, this also highlights a problem with the menu system that's not necessarily unique to Dead Heat, but is present. In order to get back to the main menu, you must get a game over. There's no pause and quit option, and you can't even go backwards in mode menus. While they do give you a restart option by pressing X and Z during a pause, the few times I tried it, it didn't work. Granted, this was right at the end of a race, and there might be a cutoff point, but even then that's dumb. Regarding driving physics, it is much more arcadey than racing and doesn't try to introduce any realism, making it much more consistent in tone. I started out hating its controls, but it does become something you get used to fairly quickly. Flush your mind of any racing sim knowledge, and you'll be okay. Given that you're using the D-pad on a Saturn controller, all turning will be digital. The Saturn wheel is specifically supported by Dead Heat, but I don't know if a Saturn 3D controller will also give you analog steering. In any case, the digital steering ends up being a positive given that there's no understeer, and certain corners are meant to be taken at that peak turn rate in order to pass opponents and zoom on through. When you get the hang of that, it turns out okay. The real difference is drifting. Drifting is performed by hitting the brakes and tapping on the acceleration, similar to other racers, but the distinction is what happens as you drift. It's like you get caught onto a roller coaster and ride it out no matter which way your car is facing until you stop turning for long enough to regain traction. Bumping into cars will slow you down, and bumping into the wall will knock you out of a drift with a speed penalty. I remember what little I played of Ridge Racer 1 doing something like this, but I got used to Dead Heat's version of it a lot quicker. Exiting drifts is easy once you figure out that the car resets to the direction the camera is facing as you pull away, no matter what the direction of the car is. You begin to plan it out, tapping both the steering and the acceleration not in order to maintain a good line, but to avoid smacking your rear on the outside walls of turns. Visually, it could be worse, but it definitely could be better. There are some nice details like the car being illuminated by the tunnel lighting, and the car models themselves are alright, but it's nothing special. I find the skyboxes a little clashing with the rest of the game's visuals, but not to an obnoxious point, and the occasional building modeled off course makes the setting a little bit more believable. Also, I guess this is a good point to talk about the cameras. You get 3. First person, third person chase, and a zoomed out third person. Given the size of the car models, I found the last one to be a lot more useful than the default third person view. What separates this game from others is the scenario mode, in which you choose one of 10 women to be your navigator, but first you must impress them enough in a qualifying race for them to join you in the passenger seat. This is where the language barrier really starts kicking in. I'm sure that the manual tells you what each woman prefers in a driver, but after hours of trial and error, I still don't have it narrowed down as to what impresses them enough. At first I thought, well, just come in first, but after trying it with all 10, only Marin was willing to join me. Was I using drift too much? I tried limiting the drifts to the corners I'd need to, and unless I missed one, this wasn't the answer. Did I need to avoid any collision with the other cars or the walls? This was a bit more tricky since the AI doesn't care and will just ram into you because how dare you be in their line. Eventually I did get a perfect race, and that still didn't do it. Only Marin would be willing to move ahead. After you qualify, you're entered into one of 3 other tracks where the essence of racing returns. Go fast and get first. Placing at least third on these 3 will be good enough, though if you place first, your navigator will be really happy with your performance. Getting 4th or lower allows you to try again, though your navigator will tell you to do better and leave the car. I ended up getting 3rd on the first course because of some of the narrow areas, but 1st on the other 2. Finally, you're on the last race, which I didn't have too much trouble with after the first attempt, and that's the scenario mode beat. I did want to see if I could win over any of the other girls and played through a second time. I honestly tried this for a lot longer than I should have, even going for any other character multiple times in a row just to see what would fill the requirements. And I finally did have luck with Yuki, who seemed to be happy with my legally distinct not a GTR. After analyzing the results of the races where I was successful and the ones where I wasn't, I think I discovered what she wants: a lap under 50 seconds. Whether or not this has to be the last lap, I'm not sure, but it just happened to be that way, so whatever. Sure enough, this worked every single time, and I beat scenario mode with her as well. The weird thing is I distinctly remember succeeding with one of the other women when I didn't win the qualifying race, so finishing 1st in that one isn't necessarily a requirement for all of them. This was back when I first got the game a couple of years ago, so I don't have any proof, but I guess it can happen. This game is okay, I suppose. There have been better, there have been worse, even in its niche of extremely simplified racing game. Not knowing Japanese to get what the navigators want is the only main block I found, but that's on me, not the game. I didn't learn any technique that would help in other games, but I wasn't left frustrated at any point. Wangan Dead Heat exists, and that's about all I can say. There is a second game. I'm not sure if it's an updated version or a sequel, but Wangan Dead Heat Arranged also exists, but I don't really care enough to look into that one right now. And in the end, there's only one person I want to impress when it comes to drifting. Next time. Thank you for watching.